Christine is an amazing mom that I met through Arizona Maha Group. And I think I would just let you introduce yourself since I don't want to put any words in your mouth.
I'm a mother of three. I'm married. I My career of choice was a wonderful career. I spent 30 years in public education, got a master's as a reading specialist, and then I also it was a K-8 reading certification and bilingual certification. So, I applied that child development throughout my life, not with just other people's children, but with my own. Um, I'm also an athlete, so I really worked in health and physical fitness throughout raising children, throughout my career, and um, that discipline and that influence that athletics has in my life really fueled a lot of the things that I chose to do with my children. So it's a good synopsis right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I know you recently had an interview with Children's Health Defense, and they described your personal experience as a perfect natural experiment of vax on vax. Since you had a first child who got vax injured and you decided not to vaccinate your subsequent children, and those two who did not get vaccines turned out much healthier than your firstborn. So please
Mhm.
walk us through. I know it may be very emotional to you, but it's very helpful to other parents and just for the general public to learn your story. If you will, walk us through what happened to your family.
First, I should mention I really set out as a mom at the age of 23, 24 years old to have natural childbirth. I didn't know anything about what pediatricians might require or what a well visit was. I didn't know any of that. I really didn't grow up going to the doctor very much. I just knew that I wanted to have natural childbirth and have healthy children. So when I got pregnant, I had a pretty normal pregnancy overall. There was some stress of buying a home and things like that, but the childbirth and labor were extremely normal, all healthy, 3 hours. Although he was coming through the birth canal posterior. That can not, it usually doesn't cause any complications, and there weren't any. Um, he was born beautiful, 7 pounds, 8 ounce baby boy, a little bit early, not too, he was full term, considered full term. Um, so at that time in 1994, the hospitals were not doing hepatitis B at birth. And I didn't have any understanding of the 1986 law. I didn't have an awareness of that, where there was no liability for vaccine companies, and the number of vaccines was considerably going higher. So I just went on as a mom with a beautiful boy, breastfeeding. He was solely breastfed, into his 2 month wellness appointment. And at that appointment, they suggested doing, I think, 5. I brought his immunization record at, yeah. So at that 2 month appointment, they did DPT, back then is what it was, oral polio, and Haemophilus influenza. Yes. And they did do hepatitis B at 3 weeks. I see that.
Okay.
I think I didn't mention that to Children's Health Defense because I didn't look closely at the dates. So it looks like his very first shot was 3 weeks after birth. And then I went again at 2.5 months.
Okay. So nothing at birth, but hepatitis B at 3 weeks.
Correct.
Okay.
So, I didn't notice anything really different at all, especially as we went through his 4 month and 6 month wellness checks, which he did have the standard vaccines. I did notice there were times where he would fuss and cry in a manner after vaccines that was, I just noticed it as a mom. I was observing my child.
So you noticed that every time after he got vaccines, or just after 6 months?
I don't remember which ones in particular. I want to say that he was sleeping 5 hours per night because he did that for a long time. And I would notice when he, for example, I think at 2 months, I looked in his baby book, 2 months, he was sleeping at 5 hours a night. And then there were times after that where he wouldn't sleep. He would fuss all night long. Mm-hmm. And it was usually after that well visit. Mm-hmm. So memories, I don't want to label it as a 6-month visit. He did that, but there were clearly some things that were distressing a little bit. Mm-hmm. I didn't share this with Children's Health Defense, and that was a much shorter interview, but one of the things I look back on is there mitochondrial inflammation as those vaccines build up? So every child's different.
Yeah.
And as they grow and change throughout that first year of life and they have those vaccines introduced, each one is uniquely responding differently. And my son just happened to go into his 19-month, and that was when he had an MMR vaccine. And that was when he regressed with his eye contact, his sensory issues, his ability to speak, after meeting his milestones. Mm-hmm. and mama, dada.
Yeah.
He would say bash ball for basketball. I remember that particular word.
So he was already talking before he got MMR injection at 19 months.
Yes.
Okay.
And I tend to have big babies. They walk a little bit later. I don't think he walked until 15 months.
Okay.
But my second born, who was not vaccinated, walked at 13 months. My daughter, I think, walked at 14 months. Mm-hmm. My third. So I have my oldest, who we're talking about here with the vaccines, and he's my firstborn. His name is Houston, so we might as well call him by his name. And then my second born came 3 years later and unvaxxed, and then my third born is a daughter. Middle is a son, and then my third is a daughter.
Mm-hmm. So at 19 months after MMR shot, it was when you noticed that he regressed.
What I remember most is that we went from a pretty happy child to one that would throw tantrums and scream, and I couldn't break him out of it. Mm-hmm. I just have to hold him. He perseverated. He had to have things lined up, or he couldn't handle his shirt being wet. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
It's okay to be emotional. Yeah. Whenever I think about my babies, that I go through the same thing. Yeah. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be embarrassed about it. Yeah. It's perfectly normal. I totally understand.
I did have to work during this time. Mm-hmm. We needed 2 incomes, and I would take him to the preschool, and he definitely was high functioning. So as he regressed in some areas, he was still extremely high functioning in other areas. Mm-hmm. One example is when he was 2, he knew when that long hand hit the 12 and the short hand hit the 4, and he knew it was 4 o'clock. Mm-hmm. He knew I was supposed to be picking him up. Mm-hmm. And he, at that time, wore a bucket on his head or a towel on his head, and his preschool teacher, for the toad room, they were called toads. Miss Peggy, she was so good to him. Uh-huh. She would just be like, Mrs. Nelson, he's watching to see the clock when you're going to come. Yeah. He knows you're going to come at 4 p.m. Uh-huh. He takes that towel off of his head, and he's watching for you. And I would feel so guilty when I was like 4:05 or 4:10 because he was just so intent upon watching that clock.
Yeah.
He didn't really play with other kids either. He definitely lined his toys up and mumbled to himself and repeatedly repeated phrases from movies or things that he loved.
At what age did you send him to preschool?
So he started, I had a caretaker near my school take care of him when he was 5 months until, I want to say, like a year and 3 months. And then I had summers off. That was back before there was year-round schooling.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't go back until almost Labor Day. So by then he would have been, from March to September, he would have been a year and 4 months.
Okay, so that was
that,
before the MMR, before you noticed anything different.
yeah.
Did the teacher notice anything different too?
That's a great question. I've never thought about that. When he was 2, it was a teacher's childcare. They were all teachers' children at my school district. His teacher knew something was very different about him. She didn't see him beforehand because those childcare teachers they stay for 1 year. Or
Right.
They have a contract.
Okay.
It's, they might turn over.
Okay. I see.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a very high growth school district, high growth area. So things changed quickly back in the early 90s. But yeah, Houston was definitely, he didn't throw tantrums at school. He threw them as soon as we got home.
Mm-hmm.
It was like he held everything together, even at a very young age.
Yeah.
And then just let down his mask. He's still like that. Still, even at the age of 31.
Oh, your baby. Yeah. No, I know some kids are like that. My kids are like that. They're perfectly behaving at school. They follow the rules. As soon as they see me, things just become different. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a teacher, I knew kids could be like that. So I work with other people's children all day. I see the whole gamut. I see kids across the spectrum of normal versus somewhat normal, way off the one end versus way off the other. I've even taught some kids who have been diagnosed with selective mutism, which is very interesting. But at that time, I was probably in my 4th and 5th year of teaching. So I was still very young and trusting and just doing what the doctors said. When Houston was about 2.5, I was doing some therapy for my own self.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the therapist's office and she was watching me talk to him and watching how he responds to me. And I also don't recommend taking your child into therapy, by the way. Even that's probably something I shouldn't do. But it was a calm time. It was a calm talk session and just working through some things in my own life. But she said, he responds to you when you use that sing-song voice, and he does it way more pronounced when you talk like that to him, and he doesn't respond at other times. And she said, there's a play therapist down the hall from me. You might consider trying out play therapy for him. There might be some delays. She didn't label it. She just made a nice suggestion. It was wonderful because I'm one of those that pushes against people, and challenges things all the time. So actually we did have him, there was a priority preschool testing program in the district, and we had him speech tested. He was in the 7th percentile in speech. Sensory motor was delayed. I don't remember that actual score. So he qualified for free preschool at that time. And then he also started play therapy. So those were such healthy things because they were such early intervention, which is what we recommend nowadays in education with autistic children.
What was his formal diagnosis?
So he went to play therapy from ages 3 until about age 9. And that was when he got a diagnosis. At age 9, he was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, which is what they considered back then in the DSM-4 as high-functioning Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism. He was also diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And he he also started speech at that time, which I highly recommend to any parent that discovers their child is having speech delays, because he went from age 3 to age 10, and he was in the 99th percentile and exited his speech IEP.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly he was able to learn.
Yeah.
Clearly he was able to take instruction and feedback, but he needed specialized instruction with his articulation and his expressive language.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, he is very, very smart. I was just curious, did you mention anything to your pediatrician about maybe the vaccines caused his challenges?
The only thing that I did, because I had already started to feel pushback, is when my second son was born, and the doctor at that time they wanted to do the hepatitis B at birth. And I said, no, I'm not doing any vaccines. I just want to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And that was becoming my motto, because let's see, Houston was 3 when Devin was born. So I had already stopped vaccinating Houston because of the changes at 19 months.
Yeah.
So when Devin was born, I talked to the doctor about the hepatitis B, and I pushed against it a bit. And I said, why give the hepatitis B at birth? And the doctor said, if he's exposed to bloodborne pathogens down the road, or yes, I know.
Down the road.
Then
yeah, it's ridiculous. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, it just...
That's okay. I mean, and also he said, if he has unprotected sex and encounters needles. I mean, I'm just sitting here looking at this tiny newborn. Yeah. And also, we have a faith in our family, and we know that we want to raise our children with certain guidelines or standards. We know that children are not perfect. They're going to have things happen in their life, but that was not something that I felt was necessary at that time. So I really had almost like a pragmatic approach to talking with the doctors. I was just like, well, okay, thank you. I'll wait right now. Yeah. I'll see you next time. And then we just kept going to well visits with my second born. We just refused vaccines.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very smart of you.
Yeah. And same with my daughter. My daughter was born, my second born was all born healthy, full term, all natural, an hour and a half. My daughter was born C-section. I went in ready to push, and then suddenly she turned and there was no presenting part. So they had to do an emergency C-section, and she's still very healthy. I took her to her 2-month well visit, and I never went back until she was 12 years old for her volleyball sports physical. Mm-hmm. And they looked at me and they said, she hasn't been here since age 2 months. Well, yeah, she's very healthy. Never had antibiotics. She never had an ear infection. She just, of all my children, she is the one that thrives the most. She is just outstanding. And she's a nurse now, an unvaccinated nurse.
That's so awesome. I always tell people the key to good health for your child is to refrain from going to the pediatrician. And people look at me like I'm crazy and anti-science. But it is true. Like pediatricians, they live off the vaccine enterprise. The only purpose of a well child visit is for them to jab your child. It is a criminal enterprise. So when you talked about the hepatitis B vaccine, every time I hear that, I have just this enormous, anger inside of me, because that one vaccine just exemplifies how evil the vaccine enterprise really is. They tell you, yeah, your child might encounter needles, unprotected sex, and you think, like, when I was having my children in the hospital, I just assumed that's a lifelong protection. When they grow up, when they're 30, maybe they'll have some encounters, and then this will protect them. But later I found out it's like 4 years of protection, and like you expect this little baby to have unprotected sex and drug abuse before they turn 4. That's just ludicrous.
And Scarlett, to piggyback off of what you're saying, the hepatitis B vaccine was, when they observed it in the studies with newborns, they only observed the newborns for 3 to 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't fathom that. And they didn't use a saline as a placebo. It's just criminal what they're doing.
They never use. I think there's probably 1 or 2 vaccines where they use placebo for safety testing. They never used any placebo testing for most of the vaccines. The whole story about the hepatitis B is that they developed it for prostitutes and gay men and drug abusers, but they were failing in marketing it to that population. So instead, they targeted little newborn babies. I wish I knew this before I had children. All of my 3 children got vaccinated the day they were born. And then I wasn't aware back then what happened to them, because all of them were just so inconsolable in the hospital. And I remember vividly, my first child was able to nurse right after he came out of me, and he nursed for over an hour. But all of a sudden, after the injections, I did not make the association at that time, but now I know it was after the injections that, the vitamin K shot and the Hep B. He just became so fuzzy and inconsolable, and he was not able to nurse for like weeks. He would just tear out my nipples, and still not able to nurse. And it's the same thing happened to my daughter as well. But the hospital, the nurses and doctors all tell you it's normal. Newborns are supposed to be like that.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking, Scarlett. My heart goes out to you. Breastfeeding is so important. It's so important for that baby to have that consistent latching on. It's so important for the oxytocin and the bonding hormones to take place between the baby and the mother. And then on top of that, if you've got these adjuvants and these things going into the baby's body, from day one, you never know what your child might have been if you allow these hospitals and doctors to tell you what to do with your child.
Yeah.
And we are the caretakers and the protectors of our children. We are the ones that should decide those things and make sure that we do our research all the time. This is pre-pandemic, but I remember reading not a study, but an informational article about health insurance at pediatric offices, and they get money when they have 95% of their pediatric patients vaccinated, fully vaccinated with all of the vaccines from hepatitis on up to the MMR, based on the age of the child and the well visit schedule of the child. So you're just a number. When you go into the pediatrician, you're a number, and that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
So if you're not visiting the pediatrician, like with my daughter, they number one, there's no health issues happening. There's no antibiotics to be prescribed. There's no skin rashes. There's no eczema. None of that. So
yeah,
of course we don't need them. I really think this should start to shift healthcare, pediatrics in our country.
Yeah,
and awareness.
Yeah, it's just so much profit to be made from the vaccine enterprise, and the whole practice of pediatrics is just, it's an outlet of that industry. I quit going to the pediatrician for the last 3 years, and my children much healthier now. They don't even get a cold. If they do get a cold or something, it lasts for like a couple of days, versus like weeks and weeks just dragging on.
Yes. And as you start to treat your own child like that, you discover things like oil of oregano, or that breast milk works in ear infections, or that you can take elderberry and zinc as a drink for your child. We did a lot more health supplements and herbal remedies. Once we got past those first, 2 years with Houston, then it was just, how do I avoid going to the doctor? If the kids got croup, which rarely happened, but they did get a cough once in a while, I just got them into a steam shower and really steamed up that shower multiple times. So, and I breastfed all of my kids for 18 months, not out in public 18 months, but morning and night. And Houston as well. Houston was a good nurser. He kept that going, did that very well. So, that eliminates some of the variables. My kids never had baby formula. They had organic baby food, or I would mash up their food, or we would just eat whole foods, blueberries, raspberries, potatoes, yams, those kinds of things. So a lot of the variables that might be contributing to the autism factor nowadays, this was before a lot of bioengineering was done with the foods. Before glyphosate was all over everything, I was still looking for organic vegetables and, feeding my kids really well.
That's really nice. So walk us through like how Houston grew up and, how he overcame those challenges. And I know he's an amazing musician now. I can't wait to get out, to the audience, because I know a lot of parents are experiencing like very devastating conditions of their child, and they, a lot of them just feel hopeless.
Absolutely. First, I would just say there's hope. There were times where I was worried. I thought I was going to have to go take out Social Security disability, and he was going to live at home for the rest of his life and not be able to be a productive worker. But I'll just continue on a little bit after age 3 and the therapy began. Houston, he was reading at age 3 or 4. So I could see that he had either a photographic memory or that he could really actually read the words. And then when he went to first grade, he was an outstanding reader. But there were other delays, of course, with speech and with his motor skills. Like his handwriting was just atrocious. I mean, not that handwriting is the most important thing on the planet, but when you see a child that can read on a 3rd grade level in first grade, and yet they can't put on their belt, or they can't tie their shoes, or they can't write their name, those are things that are definitely a problem. Sometime at some point at 2nd or 3rd grade, he started to always want his name backwards. So there was a period of a year or 2 where we called him Natsuo. I mean, he wrote it on his doors. He wrote it on his papers at school. He would not come or do whatever we were asking or even enjoying as a family unless we called him Natsuo, and he would say Natsuo, I'll show you this real quick. I found, here's a picture of him at 5 months. Let's see if we can. There's 5 months, grabbing his feet, looking into the camera. And then here's a picture, not potty trained yet. Here he is at 3.
Hi,
always now. Yeah, there he is with his diaper still on.
Yeah.
And then starting at about, he really perseverated it with things at school. He got in trouble a lot. He kind of felt like people's Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon cards were his. If he liked them so much, he would go take them out of other people's desks. And they became his. And then I would get that call from school. And that is a mild behavior. There were other things, and I want to protect his privacy because he's a grown-up now and he's a teacher of children and he's learned so much. But there were things that continuously progressed until he got expelled from 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
It was very difficult social relationships, very difficult on the playground, not respecting other children's boundaries. I dreaded the calls that came from school, but I was always supportive of the school, and they knew that. This was before we had advocates for autistic children. This was before I even had, before he was diagnosed at PDD NOS. So you can see the escalation as he went through elementary school. And then we finally had him seen a psychiatrist, which is when he was diagnosed PDD NOS. In fifth grade, after he had exited the speech IEP and I had moved him schools based on that expulsion, he took the gifted test and he tested 97th percentile in spatial reasoning, 95th percentile in quantitative reasoning, and 85th percentile in verbal reasoning. So you can see his ability to express himself clearly grew. He was a gifted child at this point. So these are the days where he would find ways to pull pranks. Like he would put glasses on in the Life Touch photo line, and I'd see his school pictures and he'd have somebody else's glasses on his face. Or they'd cut their hair and find ways to light it on fire. There were deviant things as well. The thing that I realized is that he needed to have extreme challenges and he needed to have vestibular stimulation. Trampoline was really good. Swimming was really good for him. Music was really good for him. And you'll see that he is an outstanding pianist now. And he also does voice. He's a tenor and a baritone, depending on where they need him. But he taught himself to play the piano when he was 14.
Wow.
And he had gotten in some trouble and he was confined to the house. So
he just played the piano.
That's exactly right. There was nothing else for him to do.
Yeah. Wow.
And to protect his privacy, I won't go into that, but just know I had to do with things like fireworks and smoke bombs and things like that. But when you choose to make those choices, you always have the consequence. And that's how I raised him. There was a therapist that we had for those times in junior high, and he made this chart. I'll show you this chart. He drew this. The therapist was an artist, and I know he didn't draw all those faces, but he colored all those faces.
I see.
And then we had that on our fridge, and that was the way that we taught Houston to express himself, like how are you feeling right now? Why are you feeling that way? What can we do about this? And with his OCD, we called it an old crotchety dagger, which is OCD. Sit on the bleachers. There's bleachers in your head and talk back to that OCD. So I was like constantly teacher creative, trying to figure out ways to talk to him and teach him. And the wonderful thing about his mind is that it's a matrix. So once he goes through an experience, like getting expelled from fourth grade, he doesn't want to do that thing again. There might be 275 other things he could do to get himself expelled, but he knows he should not do that one.
That particular.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So as we went into high school, he did have one more significant experience where he had to leave the school based on some serious behaviors that were really antisocial, all dealt with in therapy, but we moved him to a new school, and that school had an outstanding arts program, choir, drama, theater, and he ended up just flourishing there. I mean, he dreaded going the first few months, but then once he made that transition, he did so well. And then he actually graduated straight A's. He took some AP courses. He went on to Barrett Honors College at ASU, graduated. I think he had 1B at Barrett. And then he ended up becoming a classical piano teacher. So that's where he's at now. That's what he's been doing for the last 5 years or so.
That's an amazing journey. So has he always been in therapy?
Pretty much from age 3 when I started that play therapist all the way through age 18.
With the same therapist?
It was first the play therapist that was in that same office where I was going to therapy. And then after that, it was the therapist who did that neat little feelings chart. And that therapist carried us all the way through.
Wow.
We had yeah, just to give you an idea, and the tragic, difficult things that I didn't express all of this to Children's Health Defense, and I was kind of thinking about how to respect my son's privacy, but the if you can imagine, my son was incarcerated for 5 days and I couldn't get him out. I mean, they just wanted to that's why I think so many children that are on the spectrum or ADHD are incarcerated. And that therapist went and testified that he's not a danger to himself or others. That therapist really stuck by us. We're very grateful for him.
I see.
You know, it's not an easy life. It's, you know, you're going to go through really difficult times. The times when the schools call and you just, you know, it's another experience. You throw up your hands.
I know.
And you say, okay, God, help me get through this. Help me be temperate, measured, strong. They see how you respond. The children on the spectrum, they see. So you have to be very temperate, very measured, calm, matter of fact. If A, then B.
Yeah, I think a lot of children on the spectrum, they're very particularly perceptive. I remember Children's Health Defense had a video about a grown-up autistic individual, and he's nonverbal, but he's a speller. So he spelled out, you know, his experience throughout his life from the moment he was born, and he described in vivid detail how he felt when he got the injection of the vitamin K and the hepatitis B, and every subsequent vaccine he got, it was just devastating to his whole system. He felt every single one of them, and he remembers all the details. Yeah, autistic children are a gift from God. It's like
they are
tragic, but you know, you see how this whole vaccine scheme is damaging humanity.
Yes, I really relate to that. An example, just last night, I asked Houston to run over to my condo. I own a condo. It's an Airbnb. And I asked him to run over there and grab something for me. And then also I had it sprayed for ants. And that's I don't spray a home, but it's an Airbnb. So I don't want to have any ants in there for my guests. And Houston said last night, Mom, I'm going to hold my breath when I go in there. I don't want to smell any chemicals. If I smell chemicals, I'll get cancer. And yeah,
I think I might be autistic too. Yeah, I smell chemicals. So like the packaged food, I cannot eat them because I taste the chemicals. I taste the unnatural synthetic flavors. So yeah, I totally get how Houston would feel. So what do you think that's been very helpful to help him get through those challenges aside from the therapies?
Yeah, a couple things that we did do that I think helped were we did do inositol in milkshakes. Inositol is something that it's a natural supplement that can help with OCD behaviors. You know, I didn't measure it. I didn't have any charts or graphs that went with it, but we did that for a while. We were also part of an ASU initial study on fecal bacterial transplant, and they measured my son. They measured Houston's fecal fecal bacteria, and amazingly, his bacteria was very simple. So, you know, a normal human being has a huge gut biota of a range of bacteria, and his were a solid 3 types. And then there were very minuscule bar lines of others, but his was not a wide, varied gut bacteria. So we really began to supplement with some high quality liquid prebiotic and probiotic, postbiotic supplements. That was around age 16, 17, when he was really growing in his piano and his ability to focus and study. I mean, so I think one of the things is you can never give up. You have to remember that the child's going to grow and change. They're not going to stay the way that they are in that particular moment where they're just melting down and frustrating you so much. I think that the things that we did is I always looked at what seemed to calm him down. And, you know, his consequence sometimes was to go out and jump on the trampoline for 15 minutes. Those kinds of things, you know, if I just took a toy away, or if I just took away his game controller, or those kinds of things, that was not good. But if I set it up ahead of time, if you choose to do blank, then I will take your game controller. And then I was consistent about it. The therapist really helped me with that. You know, I mentioned fireworks. It's funny, his vestibular system really did need stimulation. And I think a lot of parents of autistic children should know that, because now Houston does fireworks for shows. He's paid to do them, sometimes $300 or $400 for an Arizona Diamondbacks game. Wow. Or somebody gets married and they want fireworks at their downtown Tempe hotel, and they get the permit. And my son works for, I think it's Western Pyrotechnics. So yeah, it's interesting if you can find their gifts and what really drives them, and just keep going that direction and keep pushing them into that direction. That's, as a teacher and as a mom, that's where I say, you know, even our typical children need that. Now, he monitors himself. He's really good at taking supplements, and also he does not do gluten most times. He can do gluten, but he doesn't choose to do it on a regular basis because it causes a lot more perseveration, and he gets very anxious, cannot focus as well on his day and get through it.
Yes.
There is something in his gut bacteria that he's lacking. It's called SIG-A, SIG-A. It's some sort of enzyme. And this might help other parents if they have their child's gut bacteria analyzed. But the SIG-A is something that is low in children that are malnutritioned or starving in underdeveloped countries. And so one of the things that Houston goes through is he is extremely expensive to feed. Number one, he eats high quality food, but he has to have a wide variety of foods. He has to have a lot of different types of fiber and healthy protein, or it's just completely, he eats so much. And I don't know if it's that malnutrition enzyme that he has or is lacking. But clearly the nutritional factor of the food has difficulty being absorbed in his body. So that's a piece that went with that nutrition and probiotics question.
Vaccines do oftentimes just decimate the microbiome. Where do you need to get a referral from pediatrician or something, or you can just go and get that analysis?
So we had it analyzed through that doctor, the PhD. There were two doctors, and I can actually get their names. I can send you their names so that you can mention it even in the notes of the podcast. But one's name was Dr. Adams, and his daughter was autistic. So they did a fecal sample before the study began, and that is what I'm referring to. I think nowadays, because this was probably 2013, I want to say. I think nowadays you can go to a naturopath. You can request a gut bacteria analysis from almost anyone.
Yeah, I remember there was a study where somebody took the COVID jab and their microbiome just got wiped out. There's just nothing left. I've done some reading lately, the dissolving illusion, the moth in the iron lung. I have come to the conclusion that vaccines are akin to pesticides. Pesticides, in the short run, they may be beneficial. Well, I wouldn't say beneficial, but they do kill undesirable pests. But oftentimes the pests develop resistance, and then you have to spray more and more. Even more damaging than that is that it kills the soil microbiome. It poisons your water sources. It kills birds and insects, beneficial insects, and they toxify your crop. There's just vast ecological trade-off you are facing. And likewise, vaccines, they kill your microbiome. And a lot of some of them may offer some short-term protection against certain communicable diseases, but you pay for that short-term protection with a hefty price of possible damage to your nervous system, cardiovascular system, your reproductive system, and also an overall weakened immune system.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and not to mention some of the childhood infections like measles and mumps, they actually offer protection against certain cancers later in life. So it's
absolutely,
yeah, so vaccines, like pesticides, are just very, very short-sighted solutions to a much more complex problem that we give them credit for.
You mentioned the book Moth in the Iron Lung.
Yeah.
It's by Forrest Moretti.
Yes.
And he, I think, is autistic himself.
He is?
High function.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
He also wrote a book called The Autism Vaccine, and it is about how they developed the
Yeah, I was going to get that one later.
Oh, so good. I gave it to my second born, who's now having children of his own, and his wife.
Awesome.
Yeah, I gave it to his wife. And so far, all my grandchildren are unvaccinated. So glad for that.
Proud
but
of you.
That in that book, it talks about how they made mistakes and they knew it, injecting that DPT shot, one shot. So they spread it out over 4 or 5 shots. And I will show you right here. If you look at the DPT on Houston's, let's see if you can see. You can see up here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DPT shots spread over time. And that book talks about why they spread them out over time, because of the lymphatic system taking in that aluminum. Yeah, and they did experiments on quintuplets in Canada. And Forrest Moretti is just outstanding as a historical narrative.
Yeah.
He does it in narrative form. It's just a fantastic writer.
Yeah, I just love the way he writes. And also, I actually didn't get the physical book. I got the audio book. He inherits his own book, and I love his voice too. I love the way he writes. I just like all around. I just love him, and I followed him on Facebook. What?
I haven't heard his voice. I'm gonna have to hear his voice.
He has a very nice voice too. Yeah, I love listening to his audiobook.
Yeah, I just hear his author's voice coming through. And because I love teaching writing, I love when I hear an author's voice. It's very powerful, and he's clearly got a passion for that. I could talk to you for a long time about those books. But, just reflecting back on that last question, just the journey and the guidance for other parents, we as parents, we have the responsibility to watch over our children. It's not the school. It's not the pediatrician's office. It's you. It's you as the mom or the dad. Yeah. You need to be informed. You need to look at package inserts. You need to look at studies. You need to start paying attention to whatever anyone is saying you should do this to your child. Even food. Now we have to look at what's in the food and what we're feeding our children, because it is so toxic. Yeah. So if there's one takeaway, I would tell parents to just stick in there and don't do it alone. Reach out and get help. Always have someone else there walking beside you, whether it's your spouse or a grandparent or a teacher or a therapist. Don't let yourself be isolated, because that's the hardest part, is when you feel like everything's doomed for your child, and it's not. children are so resilient. They
Yes.
can overcome so much.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see Houston as a perfect example of, just overcoming this devastating injury and still become an amazing individual. If you have time, talk to us about like how the way your other children grew up and what kind of impact or influence the experience with Houston had on them.
Yeah, so one of the things, great question. When you have younger siblings or any sibling of a special needs child, you end up realizing that those behaviors and those they dominate your household.
Yeah.
They can take over what the other children desire, what your other children's voices are. We realized that early on. The therapist that Houston first saw when he was really young, she would observe all the kids together from time to time in her office and in her playroom. She had an awesome playroom, and she said, you know what, you got to focus down the middle, focus down the middle. So focusing on my middle son was very important. And he's so kind. He would play with anyone. We would go to play groups for my oldest, for Houston, and my middle son would just jump right in and play however he needed. He was very giving. He would notice when somebody needed something, almost, like you could see that the codependent behaviors were possible there. We just staying focused on the middle. We did keep him in his own activities, his own separate friendships, his own designing of what he wanted for a birthday party, or he really loved football. He wanted to play football. So we had him in football at age 9, and he played all the way through high school. And now he plays beach volleyball, sand tournaments. As a dad, he's still playing volleyball. So the athlete came through. He's a very disciplined young man. I'm very proud of him too. And then my daughter, being a girl, that kind of helps separate the needs a little bit. She got focused just because she was a girl. Her clothes were different. Her activities were different, but she was also so healthy. Mm-hmm. I mean, she became a national level volleyball player by the time she was 14, 15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Loved volleyball, loved her brothers. She told me when she was probably like, 5th grade, she's like, I want to be really smart like Houston.
So sweet.
And then one time my younger two were sitting in the car, and my middle son said to my daughter, when you go to high school, all you have to do is just be nice to everybody and be friends to everybody, and then you'll have lots of friends. So, just my older son didn't care about friends. He didn't, I shouldn't say that. He didn't seem to care about social relationships as much mm-hmm. at all. But my middle and younger definitely were close, and they discussed all of that all the time. They were big influences on each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My daughter managed the boys' volleyball team, actually.
Wow.
Her older brother's volleyball team. So, yeah, they were all good students. My middle son probably could take a test and get a 95, but he'd fall asleep in class, for 3 years straight. I think there were pictures posted of them building chair towers over my son when he was a football player in high school, where
wow.
they get a kid that's sleeping and post it.
So cute.
He does not want me sharing that. We cannot show him this video.
Well, you have such a sweet family. That's so awesome. And from what I understand, both you and your daughter are involved in like some kind of advocacy, right?
Yeah, we've both gone down and testified on bills in the Arizona legislature. Mm-hmm. The bills actually made it. They were vaccine, 2 bills. One was that any child 18 and over, or a young person 18 and over, can opt out of a vaccine mm-hmm. for any reason. So post secondary education. You can go into a nursing program in the state of Arizona and opt out of any vaccine that you choose.
Mm-hmm.
It came out of the state legislature with a legislator that had a daughter that was going through veterinary school, and they were requiring her daughter to get a rabies vaccine.
Wow.
To go to vet school. And so, she sponsored this bill that allows for that.
Uh-huh.
The other bill is for parents of minors who want to opt out of any vaccine for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's important to note that in Arizona, that's already an Arizona statute. You can request a form in any public school office or any private school office, and you can choose for personal reasons to opt out of vaccines, which is what I did for my children's schooling. It's just not known. And the schools do not put that out there, and they make it as if the parents have to comply with the vaccine schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So this bill would make it publicly known and required to let parents know that they have the option in the state of Arizona, that's the law's already on the books, to opt out of vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Now, both of those made it through our conservative legislature, but the governor is probably not going to sign those bills. Yes. And by the way, it's House Bill 2058 and House Bill 2063, if anybody wants to look them up, for the state of Arizona 2025 legislative session.
Mm-hmm. Are you involved in any medical freedom movement?
Right now, I am just very active in the Maha for Arizona movement. It came out of the grassroots group and coalition that we were canvassing for RFK Jr. before he stepped down running with his presidential campaign and joined the Trump administration. But we are extremely active. So we meet with lawmakers. We're willing to talk to anyone who is willing to talk with us. The people in that group are so well educated. They've done the work. They've done the studies. They know. They've looked at the research.
Mm-hmm.
I never would have dreamed that we could have made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from being a mom that didn't even know, and a teacher that I had not seen children in my classroom that were autistic until maybe 1998, 99, which makes sense because those vaccines were taking, I believe those vaccines were taking their effect over time. And then we began to see that population in elementary schools, 98 to 2010, that's when it really exploded.
Yeah. Also, the amount of doses just exploded since the 1986 vaccine injury compensation program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the whole vaccine industry just became a gold mine. Anything you can put on the childhood vaccine schedule, you're guaranteed income for generations to come.
Yes, we have to change that. And I think right now the HHS and the National Institutes of Health just got a huge grant to start to do the GOLD study science. So RFK Jr. is going to start doing replication studies, which means that if you study a vaccine such as the MMR in one population, you recreate almost identical factors or variables in an unvaccinated population, and you look at the outcomes.
Yeah.
20% of it is going to go to replication studies and quality science, at least 20%. That just was out last week in his town hall meeting.
Yeah. RFK Jr. is going to do some amazing things. And I am just ecstatic that he got to this position. When I was campaigning for him, I really didn't expect too much. The reason I was campaigning for him was just to raise awareness in the general public, that vaccines hurt. We need to listen to this man. That was kind of my objective. I wanted more people to hear what he
Mm.
says, but although I really wanted him to be president, but I think this outcome was probably the best we could hope for.
I agree. And he has stayed on his message on point for decades. He has not wavered. So he
Yeah.
is the perfect person to go into the HHS
Yes.
and to start to push dollars into those accurate
Mhm.
quality studies.
Yeah,
And then, I'm so excited for September,
me too.
because,
Me too.
September will be real interesting
Yeah,
this year
yeah. We'll
to
finally
see
hear
what you.
some truth about vaccines.
Yeah.
Once he got into power, all of the so-called conspiracy theories, like they just got verified one by one. About vaccines, about chemtrails, about the HHS role in child trafficking. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just so happy about it.
It's a good thing. And more information is always better.
Yeah.
We have the ability to critically think. We can always sit on the fence for a bit, study, learn, but more information and free speech are always better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think post 2020, a lot of people who used to be sleeping, like me personally, I just feel so guilty about having my children jabbed so many times. I counted my firstborn's vaccine. He got 36 injections. And the last time I took him to the pediatrician, the pediatrician was pushing for more um, DTP and meningitis. And I counted that chart right there in the office, 36. My heart broke. I was already heartbreaking about having him and my other two children jabbed. But like 36, that number just kind of hit me really hard right there
Yeah.
and then.
If I can ask you a question, living in California, how are you navigating that pressure with vaccines and your children's needs versus going to school? How are you doing that?
That would be something to talk offline. Yeah, anyway, so like the last time I visited the pediatrician, I just vowed to never go back again. She was just so pushy,
Yeah.
and menacing. She was trying to scare my child into complying, even though I was there telling him not to. I asked him, is meningitis vaccine even required for the
Mhm.
schedule? And she's like, no, it's not technically required, but when you when you go to summer camp, you're camping out, you might get meningitis. And my god, my poor kid just got so scared. He knew, in theory he shouldn't take them, but like when he was put on the spot and pressured like that, he was like at the point of breaking. So
Yeah.
this then I was there to stand the ground.
Good thing. And you are doing what you should do as a parent, and that is protect him
Yeah,
and teach him and guide him, because kids are going to grow up. They're going to take these experiences into their little schema, and
yeah,
they need to know that you do this because you love him and you know what's best for him.
yeah. It was a
Um,
demonstration for him to copy later in life, because there's going to be instances that he's going to be pressured as a young adult, and he's going to be scared again. But anyway, my point of that was like, after 2020, because of this huge the scam of the C-19 jabs, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that the government is lying to them. The government is always going to try to lie to us. If we let them, if we just comply, there's no way to comply out of totalitarianism, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has always told us. So, what would be your advice, whether as a grassroots or an average citizen, what we can do to protect our rights, to prevent the encroachment of government?
Such a great question. One of the things that I share now is that it it doesn't take a huge amount of effort to do something small, and you don't realize how much and how great the ripple effect can be. An example, I learned this through the teachers union here in Arizona. If you write 2 or 3 sentences to your lawmaker and just put in the subject line, House Bill 2058, I am for this, and just write, I would greatly appreciate your support of this bill. I'm watching how you vote. And I'm a constituent in district, and state your district. That's all you need to do. They have staffers that count up those emails and they look at them. It takes, once you have a Word doc with a template, or now you could probably use ChatGPT to write 3 sentences in support of this bill. There are multiple places where you can sign up and see the bills in your district and in your area, and just quickly send an email. That's one way to make a difference. Second difference is to just talk with people, ask questions like you're doing, Scarlett, and just be there for people. I think when I started to have more time, once my children left the house, I was able to ask questions and watch and observe people, and and that helps me be more open when in conversations with them. And in turn, then when I share something about my philosophy on vaccines, or my philosophy on nutrition, or athletics, or discipline with children, I think parents and parents of the athletes on my teams, parents in my classroom, parents of kids that I tutor, they're all more able to listen. When you have something in your mind that is true, and you've read research on it, speak up, share it. Find a group like we have in Arizona, like the RFK Junior group. There's power in that, power in numbers and sharing.
Yeah. I love that group. I just feel so fortunate that I met Paula when I went to Arizona to door knock for Trump. And it has been just an awesome friendship, awesome journey with you guys ever since.
Yes. And many of those people in the RFK Junior group are middle of the road, or they were previously liberals or Democrats, and many were, on the fence, libertarians. And to come together with all of those people from different backgrounds and different political views, and to have a common cause, which is health for our children. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's beyond. We can all bond together over that.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there is power to grassroots, and I'm a firm believer. And that is also why I started this podcast. I think Bobby has to do so many things, and without grassroots support, it's very difficult, because like a lot of things he's trying to do, not just are met with resistance and opposition from the mainstream. It's also met with resistance in the general public. So we need to speak up. We need to show support. We need to educate our peers.
Yes. And look at what is not spoken. Look at how which topics are not addressed. A reporter won't ask someone with knowledge like Secretary Kennedy about brain inflammation. They're not asking questions about what might be a possible reaction when you have 6-in-1 vaccines. Yeah. Reporters aren't doing that. So we need to be that. Yeah. We need to be that voice for those things.
Well, the media is funded by big pharmaceutical companies, so they're not going to ask real questions. That's a given. Until we have free media, that the real questions are not going to come out. So yeah, I'm not able to do too much. I have 3 kids to feed, but I'll do whatever I can to contribute.
You are definitely doing that. We appreciate you for what you're doing too.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think this is the best time to do it, since the good people are in power. We cannot guarantee next time around what's going to happen. So yeah, I kind of try to seize the moment to really be loud.
Yes, and you're in the thick of it. your children are, you're being a mom on a daily basis. You're watching your kids grow.
Yeah.
You're watching the decisions you have to face. You're looking at the way that the government is pushing things or changing right now for the better.
Yeah.
This is the time for such a time as this.
I know. Yeah, it's a perfect opportunity. So is there anything else you would like to share, or any question I should ask that I haven't asked?
You have been very thorough. I'm looking at my notes down here. I think we've covered it. I just, I just encourage everyone to stay open, keep learning. Look at a success story like Houston and stay strong when the times are dark and difficult, and there are going to be difficult times, but you can make it through. Reach out to people. We were built and created for connection, as are our autistic children. So yeah, we definitely need to continue to do that and be there for each other.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on my show, Christine, and thank you for being such an inspiration.